Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Auvik's webinar on building A-team alliances to extend your MSP capabilities. We've got some really great content lined up for you today, so I think it's going to be a great webinar. Of course, our guests for today are Richard Tubb. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Richard. He is a familiar face at a lot of events and webinars and so on. He is an MSP coach and business builder. And we also have Craig Abussi with us, or sorry, Craig Sharp with us, who is the founder and owner of Abussi, an MSP based in the UK. So Richard, if you are there.
I am indeed. Thank you for hosting us, Jennifer.
Yeah, so if you could just switch to the next slide for a minute. And I'll just quickly talk about some of our housekeeping things.
Certainly. It sounds as though you're having a really good time there. You're having a webinar party, Jennifer.
Yes, we are. So for attendees, we do welcome all of your questions. So absolutely, as they come up, put them into the Q&A box or the chat box, and we will get to those at different points throughout the webinar. And this webinar will be recorded. So if you need to duck out for any time or you just want to reference it after the webinar, it will be available within 24 hours on the Auvik website. And we will send you an email with that link automatically after the webinar is over. So with that, I pass things over to Richard Tubb and Craig Sharp.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you to Auvik for hosting this webinar as well. It's a topic that's really close to my heart, and it's a topic that I think is massively overlooked by MSPs as a source of growth within their business. But before we kick things off, I know many of the attendees on the webinar today, but for those of you I don't know, my name is Richard Tubb. I'm at home in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of the UK today. And my background is one of a former MSP owner. I built my MSP business up until I sold it at the end of 2011. And now what I do on a day-to-day basis is to help MSP owners like yourselves really to free up their time, concentrate on what's important, and essentially to make more money. And I'm joined today by Craig Sharp, who is, believe it or not, a former competitor of mine. Weren't you, Craig, when I ran an MSP, but a friendly competitor, we should say.
Well, yes, good afternoon, everybody. That certainly feels like a long, long time ago, although we were very friendly as competitors, but yeah, it does feel a long time ago. Just to add some texture to my end, I'm currently in the heart of the UK in Worcestershire in the Midlands, and yeah, looking forward to an afternoon of information and chat with Richard about this particular topic, which I agree with him is often overlooked, and yeah, there's some real gems and low-hanging fruit that can be picked out of it.
Yeah, so let's look a little bit at why we should build alliances, you know, the topic of today's conversation. Now, I joked earlier on that Craig and I used to be competitors when we were MSPs, but actually we were very, very friendly competitors, even though geographically we were almost on top of each other in the Birmingham area. Just because a company, another IT company is a competitor to you, doesn't mean that you can't work with them at some level. So I think it speaks volumes, you know, to the power of alliances that Craig and I have been friends for so many years, even as competitors back in the day. And we're doing this webinar today. Both of us have built very strong MSP businesses by using the techniques and the tools that we're going to share with you today. But before we get on to alliances, I want to talk about why build alliances at all. It's a scary subject for many. It's something that lots of MSPs overlook. So why build alliances? Well, I recently did a poll, and when I say recently, I mean just in this past week, did a poll of a large number of MSPs from geographies including the UK, USA, Australia, Europe, South Africa, all over really. And I asked them, we're going into 2019, what's your number one challenge in business? Some of the responses I received back were, when is the right time for me to employ that extra technical guy? Another MSP said, with the cost of tech talent so high, I'm struggling to fill both technical and managerial roles. And we had another feedback that was along the lines of, I'm really struggling with growing my team. Now, you can see a theme there, can't you? There's a lot of angst around recruitment, and it's easy to see why. It's painful, it's expensive, it's time consuming. Craig will definitely back me up on that, but it's absolutely necessary, right, Craig?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the reality is that good people are hard to find. That doesn't mean that they can't be found at all. But you're absolutely right. For a small IT MSP provider, that sort of process is incredibly complicated and let's be honest, potentially risky. Somebody who presents well at an employment stage, interview stage, may not be the right fit moving forward. So, there is risk there. There is a challenge in finding the right people with the right level of skills for you. So, yeah, as I guess you're about to allude, working in partnership with people is a way that you can start to fill those gaps that perhaps you would have in the past thought would only be filled with permanent staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, recruitment is necessary. We're not here on this webinar to say that you'll never need to recruit anybody again.
No, not at all.
But you can mitigate the need for recruitment by using the strategy we're talking about today. You can extend your team. You can bring in specialist knowledge. You can have a lot of resources by building alliances. And so Craig and I today are going to show you how you can do that for yourself. Now, what are strategic alliances? What are alliances really? Well, you can buddy up with other IT companies to deliver services and solutions that you otherwise really wouldn't be able to. And we're going to talk about how you can find the companies to do that with reliably, because it is a scary subject. We're also going to talk about the type of alliances you can build, what is expected of those alliances, what works best. And above all else, we really want to make today's webinar as interactive as possible. You've got an opportunity here as an attendee to ask questions of two MSP owners who are very, very familiar with alliances and doing this well. So please get those questions coming in via the chat box now, and we're going to pause regularly during this webinar to ask Jennifer to feed those questions to us, and Craig and I will answer them live on air as well. So I want to kick things off with exploring the numerous reasons why you would build strategic alliances for your MSP. And for me, top of that list is bringing in specialist skills. What do I mean by specialist skills? Well, most MSPs that I work with, that I come across, fall into the trap of trying to be a jack of all trades to their clients. They end up actually being a master of none. Managed service providers really should be focusing on a core competency, and that is looking after IT infrastructure for their clients. Managed service providers are not experts in web design. Managed service providers should not try to provide, in my opinion, SEO services. There's lots and lots of MSPs out there who fall into the trap of when their client asks them for a service, be it web design, SEO, cabling, SharePoint, any of these things, they actually fall into the trap of saying, yes, we can do that for you. What actually happens when you try to provide services that are well outside of your core competency, your real comfort zone, is you quite often fall on your face. You end up delivering a service that is subpar, that the client is not happy with, and is a real pain and expensive in terms of time and money for you to deliver as well. But I understand the reason that MSPs say yes to their clients. They want to be that one-stop shop. They want to deliver all services to their clients. But you don't need to do that alone. What you can do in situations like this is when a client comes to you and says, hey, we could do with a CRM package. Instead of saying, no, we don't do CRM, or worse, yes, we can do that for you, and then scrabble around to try and learn how to deliver a CRM solution, why not buddy up? Why not build an alliance with another company, another IT company, potentially even another MSP, who provides speciality skills there with CRM? So for me, in my MSP business back in the day, we buddied up with lots of companies to deliver specialist skills. Some of the ones that off the top of my head are SharePoint. That is a specialist skill, and it's something that not every MSP has, nor should they strive to have when there are specialist SharePoint companies out there. Linux was a big one for me back in the day as well. I don't know about you, Craig, but my Linux abilities, not only me as a techie geek, as an individual, as a business owner, but my engineers' Linux abilities were quite lacking back then, quite lacking right now. It is definitely a specialist skill.
Yes, so apart from a small stuffed penguin, I don't really have an awful lot of knowledge about Linux. That's about it. Marketing of Linux is the extent of my knowledge, nothing further. But yeah, those kind of specialist skills. I think you make an excellent point, which is there's always a tremendous anxiety amongst particularly smaller MSPs, IT service providers, that the risk of moving to work in some sort of partnership will invariably end up with them losing clients, and that's a very palpable thing that I really understand. I think the issue, as you quite rightly pointed out early on, is actually you take the counter risk, which is by trying to do too much, you actually provide quite a poor service to your existing client, and therefore it's really good to try and buddy up. I use the term buddy up because we've used situations where a relationship has been developed and it has actually been symbiotic. It's been a buddy. It's not about coming up with lengthy contractual arrangements or fiscal arrangements. It's literally a kind of, can you help me with this and I can help you with that, and so on and so forth. Relatively informal. Once you prove that works, you might want to make it more structured in the future, but you have to start somewhere, and I think that can be a really good place to start.
Yeah, so specialist skills, well, let's talk more specifically about your experiences here, Craig. You are an absolute expert, and your Abussi are absolute experts with delivering voice over IP projects. Now, I know you're going to blush a little bit when I say that, but it's the absolute truth. You are world class at what you do, and you are my go-to guy for all things VoIP. And as a result, you've also been the go-to guy for VoIP solutions for many of my MSP clients and wider communities there. So VoIP is a skill that you have put an incredible amount of time and effort into learning, haven't you? So you're good at it. But perhaps if it was something like, let's just say, data cabling or web design, not going to be something you're going to take on yourself, is it?
No, absolutely. And actually, all of those three things that you've mentioned, we use partners for. So data cabling, we have a data cabling partner, and we've worked with them for so long now that we place them into a client. We get them to work directly to make appointments, and the work that we get back, the feedback, the assessments and outlines of work that's required is absolutely brilliant, very much in our style. Web design, we don't do any web design, but we partner with a provider for that. And yes, I am blushing this end about voice over IP, but I really was a tremendously early adopter of this technology, probably 15 years ago, when the infrastructure just wasn't there to run it. And I think it's an incredibly serious opportunity for MSPs to grow a portion of their market. A lot of our customers feel poorly serviced by traditional telecom partners. They feel rather bamboozled by the whole process. And actually, if they can hand over their telephony into their IT provider, they feel very, very happy. So yeah, we work with partners. It has been a long road, and there has been very in the early days some reputational damage that came from us partnering with people that didn't perhaps offer a service that we wanted. But that's the nature of the game. One has to try, find people that you can work with, and then you build those relationships moving forward. And now we have a very robust approach where we can offer the services. We have a range of services depending on what it is the customer wants and depending on their size. And we can then offer that through these partners, which actually, rather than bring reputational damage, brings, in my opinion, reputational enhancement, because we don't need to be involved in the process, but it's a really high quality product and service being offered by that partner that we use.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. And again, for you listening in today, this is practical examples of MSPs who have done this. This is not theoretical. This works for MSPs who are out there. And the most progressive MSPs that I come across do focus on their core competencies and buddy up, build strategic alliance with other IT companies to deliver services that are of benefit to their client. We're going to talk some more about what that looks like. Craig's just talked about some of the pitfalls, contracts, things like that. We will definitely talk some more about it. But the number one reason that I think MSPs should be looking at strategic alliances is to offer specialist skills that are outside their comfort zone. So let's move on. What are the other reasons that you might build alliances? Well, a simple one, a very powerful one, is additional resource. I can tell you that when I was an MSP business and there was a couple of engineers within our business, so we were really quite small, if we didn't build strategic alliance with other IT businesses for additional resource, we wouldn't have been able to win a number of projects that are that we were, quite frankly, punching well above our weight with. For everybody who's joining us on the webinar today, right at the end of the webinar, I'll give you a link. It's not gated. I'm not going to ask for an email address or anything else, for a resource kit. This resource kit is going to contain all of the notes, the podcasts, the blog posts, the articles, the books, the services, everything that we talk about today. I'm going to include a link to, and I'm going to include a link to a blog post where it's going a long time back, but when I was a Microsoft partner as an MSP, we came across a piece of business that was in the region of £250,000. It was spread all over the UK. It needed much more resource than we could ever provide as an MSP standalone. But we built up relationships, and we'd done this well before the project. We built up relationships with other IT companies. And when it came to that project, instead of saying, no, we wouldn't have the resources to deliver that, we made a round of phone calls and essentially built a coalition. We built a team of IT businesses around the UK. And we're going to talk about geographical coverage a little bit later, something Craig is very familiar with. But I wanted to get across the point that if you need additional resource, recruitment is not the first place that you should look. Recruitment tends to be, when it's done well, a slow process. As Craig said, you need to make sure you bring the right people in. You're asking the right questions. If you need to scale up quickly to deliver a project with more resource than you have, sure, you can bring contractors in. That can be very, very expensive. I can tell you that when I ran an MSP, I stretched our resources. I was able to deliver much bigger projects as a result of these alliances that I built with other businesses. Craig, you have actually been that additional resource, haven't you, for other smaller IT providers who have needed not only your expertise, but your additional resource within the business.
That's true. Yeah, I've been on both sides of the fence. And I think when you talk about new projects that MSPs might be taking on, one of the things that I see on a regular basis is, I don't know if it's the way that I work or maybe it's something ubiquitous across the industry, but actually when you take on board a new client, the vast majority of the work done by an MSP often tends to be quite intense and quite short-lived. So the first 3 months of you taking on a new client, particularly if they're a slightly larger client than maybe you would have taken on in the past, is where all of your time and resources are going to go to. It's the usual problem of you're often picking up from somewhere that's not very good. There are some things to sort out. There's some heavy lifting to do, metaphorically and physically. And that's the time when you need the resource. And you're absolutely right. If your first thought is to recruit for that, what you're going to do is have that resource within the business for the first 3, maybe 6 months, and then maybe they're not needed as much. So actually calling upon local MSP IT providers to come and assist in that initial period of intensive activity is where I think you can gain the maximum value from those sorts of partnering relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say, if there are any smaller MSPs joining us today, or even companies who are in the process of moving from break-fix transitioning across to the managed service model, one of the biggest challenges that you will probably have is making the time to do the work on your business, as opposed to the trap that many of us as business owners fall into, constantly working in the business. So let's just say, for example, you're a one-man band, you're trying to build a business there, you're trying to move to managed services. It's going to take a lot of your time to do that, and those pesky clients constantly phoning us, texting us, emailing us, asking us to do things. How do you get off that treadmill? How do you enable yourself to do the work in the business? On the business as opposed to in the business? Well, I can tell you from experience that when I was a one-man band, I budded up with other IT businesses just to deliver an hour here, a day there, enabling me to work on my business. And that investment of time soon reaped rewards, and I was able to then make hires, recruit people, but to do it properly rather than as a knee-jerk reaction. So I can't stress this enough. We've talked about alliances for speciality skills, but also alliances for additional resources is so, so powerful.
Can I jump in there just a moment?
Please do, Craig.
I think that's a very good point, particularly when you're trying to grow the business. And one of the challenges is if you are a relatively modest MSP IT provider, you will probably know lots of other, relatively modest IT MSP providers. And so sometimes there can be that problem, which is you don't have enough time, or they don't have enough time, or however that works. I think the working on the business is really, really good. And one of the ways that I did that early on was by partnering with a local IT company where you agree in advance to have coverage days. So you say to yourself, right, I'm going to be working on my business on a Tuesday. And what you do is in advance, you work with your partner, buddy, MSP company and say, look, Tuesdays where I'm going to need you to, if you can, help me out. There might be some visits, there might be some calls to make. It's a kind of customer services role to try and deal with issues and so on and so forth. I think I would probably speak for most people to say, well, it's very nice having these buddy relationships, but nobody wants to get an emergency call from a customer. Equally, nobody wants to get an emergency call from another MSP saying, can you sort that out? But by planning in advance like that, and by having those days or half days where you can get your mind in the right place and say, I've agreed some coverage, somebody can look at some tickets or answer a call or however it's going to be. That is the start of you being able to maybe allocate that time for an important client visit, writing proposals, doing some marketing, getting your social media in order. Has to start somewhere, half a day once a week or a day every 2 weeks. But I think if you have that relationship and you have that partnership built and pre-planned, then it works for both parties.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Craig, and thanks for sharing that. You're absolutely spot on. And it actually leads me into the next reason why you would build alliances, and that's for holidays or sickness cover. Now, this is especially applicable to smaller MSPs. Perhaps an MSP, you're a one-man band, maybe even less than 10 people in the business. You can get hit hard by sickness cover or holiday. And so building alliances with other IT businesses means that as well as adding resource to scale up or, to have the ability to scale up for larger projects, if that decision is forced upon you, then you're able to keep the business going. It gives you that breathing room that Craig talked about as you make decisions on where you want to go next. Do you recruit? Do you bring someone else in? What does it look like? So holiday and sickness cover is a huge one. In fact, this isn't just applicable to smaller MSPs. I was speaking to an MSP the other day who actually had their service desk team lead taken out of the business through a personal emergency, and we're going to be out of the business for quite some time. Now, they could have scrambled and recruited someone else. What they actually did, they had a very good relationship with another IT company and were able to effectively borrow that service team leader there to come across and to help somebody else within their business to step up and to take that role on as well. So this can work for businesses of all sizes. I would say this especially works if within your business, and this may be you have a single point of failure, or an SPF, as I call it. Now, an SPF, a single point of failure, could be somebody within your business who, at the moment, your business cannot cope without. I would encourage you in this situation to get, and that person might be you. Let's be upfront and honest here. You are most likely to be the SPF as a business leader within your own business. I would encourage you at the end of this webinar to go away and to think about what knowledge is unique to you, what experience is unique to you. try to document that knowledge, get it essentially out of your head and down into a system. Once it's in a system or once it's documented, you can then use alliances to fill that gap. So in the case of the MSP that I just spoke about with our service desk team leader, because that service desk team leader had documented what needed to be done on a day-to-day basis, had not kept the knowledge in the head, but put it down in documentations and systems, they were able to go and get another very capable service desk team leader, essentially as a favor off one of their alliance partners. That person could come in, knew how to run a service desk, but didn't know specifically for that MSP, the nuances, the things that were done. And so they were able to come in, pick up the documentation, pick up the systems, and keep things ticking over. So please don't make the mistake of thinking that alliances are only good for holidays or sickness cover for small MSPs. It works across the board. Craig, have you been in this situation before where you've been left, sort of caught short by a lack of resource within the business?
Yeah, two things really. I mean, back in the early days, I used to buddy up with a couple of local IT companies when I was on holiday because I was the only person. My sister-in-law continues to live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I used to go with my wife to see her at Christmas time. A lot of IT people take Christmas off because it's one of those periods where you can afford to be away, but I would always have some cover to make sure if there were any sort of emergencies that they were dealt with. And that was a buddy system in that it was reciprocal. They would help me when I went on holiday and I would help them when they went on holiday. I think your point about getting information out of your head or systemizing, I've got a slight skew on that one. I completely agree with what you've said, but another really practical thing which I think's helpful is a lot of smaller IT providers, MSPs, have shall we call it bespoke communication methods, not formalized communication methods. One of the things I would strongly recommend, a lot of people will be very reticent to buy expensive ticketing systems or things of that nature. There are many out there that do a very good job at just corralling that inbound email information into a single point. If you work through the process, if you've got a bespoke system that's really difficult for someone else to use, it's very hard for someone else to come and help you use it in your absence. If you have a formalized system like we do, then you can allocate a user login to somebody remote to your business because it's a cloud product, and they can field emails and deal with questions. And a further point to that is, if it's an emergency situation like illness or sickness or emergency absence, what you're looking for that person to do is not necessarily solve the problem, is not be a level 3 technician, is not deal with, Azure and hosted exchange issues. What you're looking for them to do is to manage client expectations, to be a bit of a customer service person really, to acknowledge the inbound inquiry, explain that there may be a delay on the response due to a certain scenario. Most customers are very understanding. To offer help, to try to see if there's any really obvious things you can sort out. But generally, if it's for one day or maybe 24 hours, sort of over 2 days, I think that would actually work really well. But again, it comes back to, if you don't have a formalized communication system between you and your customers, that itself would be a barrier for someone to come and help you if they're having to use your email system or Gmail or whatever sort of bespoke solution you have for client communication.
You're absolutely right, Craig. And in the resource kit, I've taken the liberty of including a number of tools, resources that I'd encourage MSPs to explore to do exactly what Craig's talked about there, to make it easier for somebody to essentially to step into your business and to enable you to do that. The point here is to think about this now rather than when the emergency takes place. Start building your relationships with other IT businesses now. And I should say that this isn't applicable to just IT businesses. I've talked about an SPF. I'm no longer a managed service provider. I work with the owners of managed service provider businesses. And we were actually in a position, weren't we, Craig, a couple of years ago, where if you think it's not going to happen to you, you're never going to be taken out by emergency. Well, it happened to me. I was quite literally knocked over a few days before I was due to give a keynote presentation at a big conference. And thankfully, I built, let's call it what it is. We've got a friendship, Craig, but it's an alliance as well. And you were able to step in for me, weren't you, at very, very short notice to deliver the presentation. What better example of an alliance can we find than that?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And the fact that the driver of the vehicle was never found means that, you know, you can't prove whether it was me that took you out in the first place. I joke, but yeah, that's exactly right. You know, it's a rather extreme example, but you're absolutely right that there can be situations that occur like that. So you are better to build those relationships now and have them dormant or tickling along rather than wait until the crisis, and clearly that there's very limited option available to you when you're in the midst of a problem. So it's really good to try and find those people, and I know you're going to come on to areas and locations where those people might be found or sought for you to build relationships moving forward.
We will do, and I can see the questions coming in. We'll pause in a second for a few of those questions, but I just want to sort of finish up on other reasons why you might build an alliance. The other obvious one is geographical coverage. Now, when I was an MSP, we actually picked up clients in other parts of, not only the other parts of the UK, but other parts of the world. So we might have won some local business, and then that client said, oh, we've opened a new office in Liverpool, or in one case, we've opened a new office in Las Vegas. Anything you can do to get us up and running? And actually, I was able to reach out through the relationships I've built up with other IT companies in those geographical locations to provide feet on the ground. It could be as simple as, if we post you this router or this network switch, can you go in and connect it up for us? It could be as much as, well, we've lost connectivity to this site and we need eyes on the ground, feet on the ground to actually see what is going on. So either one of your engineers can jump in a car and drive hours, not so much in the case of Las Vegas, that's a bit too far away from us in Birmingham, but you need to have those alliances in place so that you can cover the geography. I know this is something that you've done, haven't you, Craig? You know, you cover Birmingham and London predominantly, but you've had other clients with offices in other parts of the country and the world.
Yeah, that's right. I know that for a lot of people listening to this who may be in the States or certain parts of continental Europe, you know, geography is always a significant issue because just the nature of where you are, it's bigger. Even in the UK, though, it's worth bearing in mind that most people tend to buy their IT services from within a relatively narrow radius of where they are. And so for us, our clients are in the Midlands, and access to them for us is, you know, within the hour normally if there is an emergency. But for those clients who then go and open satellite sites or have headquarters in other parts of the country, that can be slightly more challenging. So yeah, we have a relationship with a business down in central London. They're about a quarter of a mile away from the House of Parliament, so genuinely central London. And we have 3 clients that have outposts, as we call them, in central London area, and we have used them to go and do work such as go and set up a laptop that we ship to site and we need some team viewer software or other product loading on. We've used them to go and connect up some telephones that have been pre-configured and they need to be patched into network switches and things like that. You know, it sounds pretty straightforward stuff, but here's the deal. It goes back to what Richard said about value of your time and working on or in your business. I would much rather pay, as we do, the hourly rate of the person down in London to do that work, knowing that they're technically competent, local, and can do the job quickly, rather than have one of my engineers drive, or for central London, go on the train and waste that time effectively going to do relatively simple work. And so I think it's really important to build those relationships so that not only you don't see them as you have to use them every time. It's also about strategically using them. I can think of an example where something might crop up and there's an existing client visit that you really should do. An emergency crops up and you genuinely have that dilemma of, well, should I go to the emergency or should I go to this really valuable client? Actually, you don't want to be in that situation. If there's an emergency some distance away that you know you won't be able to do both on the same day, have that relationship to send someone from another partner or another MSP or IT provider to go and do that work.
Yeah, and again, this isn't to do with the size of your business. I know we've got MSPs of a variety of sizes, shapes, geographies, everything else on the webinar with us today. I know very big MSPs who use strategic alliances with companies in other parts of the country and the world to deliver services to their clients that they would not be able to realistically offer otherwise. So again, geographical coverage, another fantastic reason why you would want to build up a strategic alliance. And just to conclude, what I think are the top reasons to build strategic alliances, and this is one that's becoming more and more prevalent, 24/7 coverage. Now, I get asked by MSPs almost every week, hey, we've had a new client or an existing client and they've asked us, can we extend our support beyond office hours to give them 24/7 coverage? Now, it's a big, heavy load for you to take that on and to implement it within your business personally. And just like recruiting somebody new to your business, is it really going to work out? Do you need that additional resource, or is it something that might, at some point in the near future, snap back and you won't need it anymore? To gear yourself up for 24/7 coverage is a big ask. However, through strategic alliances, you can deliver that out of hours coverage to clients where otherwise you would have had to say no. I can think of one specific MSP in London who has opened offices in Sydney, and they, as a service, have offered those chasing the sun, as they call it, following the sun. They've been able to offer their service desk in Sydney to other MSPs in the UK. So for out of hours coverage, that MSP in Sydney is geared up to take calls in their time zone, no problem at all. So when Sydney's asleep, you've got London. When London's asleep, they've got Sydney. It's a really easy way to do this, and it's a much easier and more cost-effective way than trying to provide 24/7 coverage yourself. So to sort of conclude there on the details of why you would want to build strategic alliances, I think Craig and I have put forward a number of really compelling reasons why you might want to go out and look for alliances now. It's going to enable you to take on business that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. It's going to enable you to explore opportunities that otherwise you would have had to say no to. And just before I move on to the next phase of our presentation, which is where we're going to talk about types of alliances. Jennifer, I can see questions coming in, so I just wanted to pause there and see if we have any questions that might be applicable to us now.
So Richard, the questions that we've had come in so far are about things I think you're going to talk about coming up. So one is, how do you feel about outsourced help desk companies? That's from Lee. And then Ernst had a question about wanting to partner, but being worried about his customers being stolen and his employees being poached.
Great questions, yeah. So perhaps we'll press on at this point then, Jennifer, because I think we might be able to answer those questions with what we're going to talk about next.
Great.
Cool. So let's talk about the types of alliance then. So at the moment, really, I've given the impression that the only types of alliances that you can make are with other MSPs. And of course, earlier on when I was talking about buddying up with web developers, SEO, SharePoint, CRM companies, of course, it's not just MSPs that you can buddy up with, it's other types of IT companies. So partnerships with IT companies are very, very important. And when we talk about partnerships, really, there's different types of partnerships that are out there. So Craig and I have talked about buddying up with other companies, but you can also pay other companies to provide services for you. So outsourcing is a type of alliance. You could outsource your NOC, your network operations center. You could outsource your help desk to allow another IT company to answer telephone calls and tickets for you. There's a growing rise in the industry at the moment to outsource your SOC, your Security Operations Center. It's a fairly new acronym, but again, it's a mixture of what we talked about earlier, the speciality skills that are required, and the increased resource that is required. There's a number of players in the game here, and I've included them all within the resource kit that I'll share later. Some of the main ones are Continuum. There's companies such as InBay. There are a lot of companies out there that specialize in providing services to you to look after your back end, to look after the patching and updating of servers, to look after your help desk, to answer calls from clients, to deal with tickets, and to look after your security requirements as well. So as well as buddying up with other companies, other MSPs, other IT companies, and we'll talk a little bit more about how potentially that'll work in terms of contractual situations, you can also pay other companies to deal with projects. And Craig, I know you've got a good example, haven't you, of a project that you took on, or a client that you took on that needed a mixture of these services that I've just talked about, and you actually worked with Continuum on it, didn't you?
Yeah, we were given an opportunity to take on board what was at the time a significant step change in client size. So, you know, the sweet spot for us is around 30 users. We have some 5 to 10s. We have mostly sort of 10 to 50s, but yeah, this one was going to be more in the 100 or so. And so we partnered with Continuum to get through the first 6 months. So I said earlier that many of the new projects MSPs take on board requires the largest level of investment in the first maybe 3 months. But this was a significant client. We'd identified there was a lot that was wrong. We needed to do quite a lot of work, including wholesale migration from local Exchange servers into cloud email services. So there was a lot to do. And so we partnered up with Continuum to deal with that initial flood, what we felt was going to be a flood of inquiries. And again, in a way, that was us making sure that we were ready. We didn't want to wait until we saw what the landscape was going to be and start to experience it and then try to retrospectively add resource. We took it upon ourselves to say, well, clearly they're a larger client than we're used to. There will be a lot of requirements upon our resources, so let's get ready in advance. So yeah, we used Continuum for that initial period.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, Craig, because lots of IT companies are reluctant, are reticent to actually go to, you know, a third party to deliver client-facing services. The reality is the most progressive MSPs that I'm working with around the world have all bought into, you know, this model of outsourcing low value tasks, but high priority. And what I mean by that is, you know, the bread and butter, the patching, the updates, the restarting backups, all the stuff really that we as technicians who have worked in this industry don't really enjoy doing, but are absolutely necessary for an MSP business to run and to deliver to their clients. So I would encourage you, we're going to talk a little bit more about alliances with other IT businesses and how you can arrange those. Do not eliminate the idea of bringing in additional resource, additional expertise, additional cover by speaking to a Continuum, an InBay, any one of these number of services that are out there at the moment. And we'll also talk a little bit later on about how you choose who the best alliance partners are for you. We'll definitely come to that. But for now, I wanted to make people aware that, yes, there are these services out there.
While we're just on that topic, what I would say from a super practical level for those people listening, and this is not relevant to a particular outsourced provider, I think it's really important for people in your positions, small MSPs, or regardless of size actually, the people who you outsource to will have a particular process that they need to follow. And it's almost impossible for you to say, right, I'm going to install your product, piece of software usually, onto 15 or 20 devices this afternoon, and the following day, I don't have to worry because you're just going to field every call and know how to solve problems and support every element of that business. If you go into the plan of outsourcing your help desk with that expectation, you will be sadly disappointed. That isn't how that works. You need to work with the outsourced partner to make sure that you are following a process that works for them so that they can follow a process that works for you. So the key phrase, as we're saying all the way through this webinar, is partnership. It's about making sure that they understand your infrastructure, the way that your computers are set up, that you've loaded all the necessary patches, that they understand how it works. If you don't go through that process and just assume load software equals full coverage, walk away, that's a recipe for disaster. So go into it open-eyed, with awareness and a realization that it is a partnership and you need to do as much for them in the initial stages as they're going to do for you in the longer term.
Phenomenal advice, Craig. And yeah, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. You need to treat these alliance partners as though you would, as you would treat a new employee within the business. You wouldn't just come in and say, throw them, you know, a username and password and say, get on with it. You've got to give them guidance. You've got to understand that they're new, that they need to understand your business, and you need to understand their business. And I think that's probably a good segue into our next conversation, which is about how do you structure partnership agreements.
What a beautiful comms cabinet.
What a beautiful comms cabinet. So any of you who follow Craig or I on social media will know we absolutely love a beautiful comms cabinet like this. This is a lovely one, isn't it? And I'm sure many of
We've all seen a lot worse.
I was going to say, if anybody's got their worst example of a comms cabinet, tweet it out to us afterwards, because we love seeing those ones to point in horror at them as well. But actually, Craig, you mentioned this earlier, but data cabling is a great example of how you can structure partnership agreements. So within my MSP business, we knew how to do data cabling. We didn't want to do it because it's actually a specialist skill. We were capable of doing it, but it took us a lot of time and effort, whereas the specialists can come in and get it done to a high standard a lot quicker than us. Now, how to structure partnership agreements with other IT companies. There's one or two ways. And the first way that I'd recommend is, well, the partner company, in this case, a data cabling company, represents your MSP business. So if they're going into a client site, they're essentially a subcontractor to you, although, you know, it's more a partnership than a contract there. So within our business, our data cabling partner, when they went to client sites, they represented my MSP business. They wore branded clothing, you know, with our logo on. If the client wanted any additional work doing, they would refer our client back to us and say, absolutely, speak to them. The IT company, the data cabling company in this example, wouldn't bill my client, they would bill me, and then I would bill the client. So this subcontractor model, if you want to call it that, worked really well for some of these services. We also did this with CRM projects and other things. So there is a decision to be made when you're buddying up with another company. Are they going to represent you, or are you going to make the introduction to the company? And I know, Craig, you work in a similar way, don't you, with some of these outsourced skills such as data cabling?
Yes, I think what's happened over the years, I'm very much with you. In the early days, it was very important for us to ensure that everybody that went on site representing us was, you know, clearly visible as being part of Abussi. I have to be candid that sort of softened a little bit, and I have less of an anxiety now about partner providers going in representing Abussi, but also it's understood that they don't work for us full time. They are providing a specialist skill. I think when you're providing a specialist skill, that's much less difficult negotiation to have with the customer. Data cabling is a very good example. We've used a company that's local to us in Birmingham. A guy heads that up called Matt. If I get an opportunity where there's a requirement for cabling, I will tell the client, Matt will come and see you, Matt will do a survey, Matt will feed back to me, Matt will give me the recommendation and a proposal as if he was giving it to the customer. I top and tail it, and that then goes out to the client. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, really. The client is not being invoiced or serviced directly by our partner, which again, being candid, means there's opportunity for margin for us, but also it means that clearly the customer knows that a specialist has come to do that work, and it is being done by a specialist provider. Like you, I have been that person, God, probably 10 or more years ago, that bought boxes of Cat5 cable and ran it down corridors and bundled it together and terminated ends. And I would not want to go back to that at all. The problem is Cat5 cabling is one of those things that if you do it badly, it will bite you every day that you're looking after that customer.
Yeah.
It's so overlooked by most customers because they just don't see it. They don't need to interact with it. They don't really understand perhaps the value of it. But if it's done badly, it's always going to be a constant problem. So I think that's an area where having some sort of specialist partner to work with is really, really important.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I mean, we've all, as MSPs, come across the horror stories where the client has got an electrician to lay the cable.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, but it's actually what you said, Craig, is true for pretty much all the services we talked about. If you deploy a SharePoint solution and do it badly, it's going to come back to bite you. None more so than voice over IP. You know by bitter experience that if you do VoIP wrong, you're going to get calls about, well, probably emails because the client can't call you.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're going to get hammered with it every single day. So it's really important, isn't it, from a quality perspective, to make sure that you've got these special skills there.
That is the voice over IP joke, effectively, which is, the client hasn't called me. I'm assuming everything's great. The client can't call you, of course, is the joke. But if you've done it badly, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So great points there. And I just want to talk briefly about the other scenario that you talked about there, Craig, which is nowadays you're more inclined actually to refer, a partner company into your client. We did this back in the day. I'll give you a specific example. We had a proposal for a big managed service project going out, and the prospect at the time spoke to us and said, "Hey, could you deliver a CRM solution as well?" And we openly said, "Actually, CRM is not something we do, but we are happy to liaise with a partner of ours to deliver that solution to you. They can bill you directly. They can be the one who you speak to, in the case of any additions or anything, to do with the creating the project up front and settling the project in as you want it. We're going to be there, but they're our trusted partner, so happy to do that." We ended up winning a substantial piece of business against two much bigger competitors. And when I asked the client, "Hey, thanks for the business. Why did you decide to work with us?" They said, "You were the only one who said, yes, they would do CRM. The other two businesses that we spoke to do the proposal for us said, we don't do CRM, sorry." So we went in there, and instead of saying no, we said no, and let us introduce you to our partner company, who essentially did the work directly with them with our oversee there as well. So this can work really, really well for your business. I'm going to move on there at that stage because I know we've got questions about this, and it's to do with, okay, this all sounds great, but I'm scared about giving my customer up to another IT business. Aren't they going to run off with them? What if they don't do things very well? What if it comes back to bite us? Now, I know that when I ran an MSP business, a lot of the alliances that we built up were as a result of this recurring theme, building a good relationship. We had handshake agreements in place with people. We trusted them. They trusted us. There wasn't any issues. However, I understand that many of you, if you're new to building alliances, will want to make sure that you have contracts in place beforehand. There's a couple that I would suggest, really simple contracts that you can put in place up front with anybody that you work with. And the first one is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. I would suggest that for professionalism's sake, any agreement, any alliance that you go into should have a signed NDA for both parties. A non-disclosure agreement is basically a signed document that says, hey, you are going to hear things that are confidential. You are going to see data on my client's network and on my network that is confidential. I want you to agree up front that it's going to go no further. Again, when it comes to enforcing these contracts, well, that's an issue for lawyers. So I would encourage you to not rely on these things alone. You've got to have the trust in place up front. But a non-disclosure agreement is really easy to put out. If any of you don't, on the webinar today, don't have an NDA contract, feel free to get in touch with me and I'm happy to share a template with you. I'm not a solicitor. I don't pretend to play one on the internet. I would encourage you to go and get any of your contracts vetted by a trained solicitor, their qualified solicitor. But an NDA is a good one to put in place. The other one is a non-compete agreement. And so for anybody worried about, oh, is this partner going to run off with my client? Put a non-compete agreement in place that says actually they're not allowed by law to poach your clients to work directly with your client without your express permission. And that could also extend to the staff within your business as well. But the bottom line here is, yeah, contracts definitely are important. And as you grow as an MSP, they certainly become more important. But the fundamentals of alliances are built on good, solid, trusting relationships. I know, Craig, I think within your business, you're more about the relationship and less about the contracts, aren't you, in most cases?
You know what? I'm not going to be embarrassed to say that I'm really not a contract person. I find them limiting and I find them onerous, and I find that invariably they're not as good as as is now often described, an old-fashioned relationship. Contracts are absolutely vital if you're working with someone you don't know, you've never met, you have picked them out of a web search or show my age now, Yellow Pages, probably shouldn't say that. But if you just happen upon an IT company and go, well, they'll do, I'll use them, then yeah, contracts are great. But actually, I think almost exclusively every long-term relationship or partnership that I've had with other MSPs has been built around awareness, friendship, and relationships that come from other areas. We did say we were going to mention it, but organizations like CompTIA, those are events that I attend on a regular basis. Good people go to those events. Good people attend, and they are people with whom you can build relationships. And here's the deal. If you've known someone for a long time and you ask them to help or provide some assistance, or you'd like to get a representative of their company to go to your company to deal with some work, if you've got a good relationship with them, you don't really need a contract in place, because you're going to see them at the next CompTIA meeting. And if things are not right, well, you can talk about it. You can have a conversation about it. I don't think it would ever get to that point, but there are lots of people whose names I could mention probably don't mean much to most, although some of them might be on the webinar. But people who attend those events in the UK, I know they occur in other parts of the world as well. And I take the view that by the very nature that someone has taken time out of their diary to go to an event like that, means that they are the sort of people who are already ahead in terms of trust, reliability, and somebody that you could turn to receive some support. So yeah, contracts for people you've never met, but in reality, build a relationship with them in other ways.
Yeah, and Matt.
Richard and Craig, I just want to jump in here for a minute and alert you to the fact that we're getting close to the end of our time. We are 1 minute to the hour. I'm hoping some of our attendees can stay a little longer so that we can wrap things up, but I do encourage you to sort of bring things to a close. We have had some other questions come in as well.
Yeah, sure. And apologize, Craig and I, we love talking about this stuff, and we've probably talked a little bit too much about the details of contracts and things like that. I think the bottom line here, though, is that you've got to build a relationship. I can see some of the comments coming in on the chat. Matt, for instance, says perhaps it would be helpful to curate companies' competencies and contacts. Absolutely right, Matt. Yeah, this all starts when this webinar finishes. Go away and start building these relationships with other companies. In the resource kit that I will share very shortly as well, we've included a list of user groups that you can go to build these relationships. You can also go to events, conferences. You can also go to your local networking events, meet IT companies there and speak to them as well. But these are relationships you need to start now before you activate them later on. So very, very important. And I just want to make the point as well, just as we wind down, whilst contracts may not necessarily be for you, they might be, may not necessarily, you can set expectations of what you expect from other IT companies who are going to be speaking to your clients. So that could be around branding, how services are delivered, quality standards, that type of thing as well. So it really, really does make a difference. So we talked about conferences being a good way to meet other IT companies. CompTIA provide the EMEA conference here in Europe. They also provide the Breakaway conference or ChannelCon across in America. I would urge you to seek out those conferences and talk to other IT businesses. There's also peer groups and local user groups. These are everywhere in the world. This is a great way to go and meet other IT business owners, to talk about the challenges within your business and to start to build the relationships up. In fact, I think, Craig, that's where you and I met at a local Association of Midlands IT Professionals group as well.
Arden Hotel.
Yeah, there's also online communities. So there's a mutual friend here of ours, Nigel Moore, who runs the Tech Tribe. This is an online community. So if you need to cover wider geographies but don't know where to find IT companies, you can build a relationship with other MSPs, other IT companies, by joining in these online communities as well. ConnectWise have the ConnectWise network, Autotask have user groups. These are all opportunities for you to get involved and to speak to other IT companies. Seek it out. And local business networking events as well. We talked about, don't underestimate the potential to get out there to speak to other IT businesses who are local to you as well. The bottom line is here, when you go away from this webinar, start looking around for other IT businesses to buddy up with. Start looking around for relationships to build now. The best time to build these relationships was yesterday. The next best time is today. I hope that you will take away from this webinar that building strategic alliances can help your IT business to grow faster than it possibly could alone. It can be a lonely job doing it, building an MSP business alone. I would encourage you to reach out to other IT businesses to learn from them, but also to build relationships, to build resource, to build speciality skills, to get to know how you can help your clients better through working with others. And in the bottom right hand corner there, I've just included a link to the resource kit, tubb.co/Auvik Alliances RK. You can download everything that you need from this webinar, including links to all of the resources that we mentioned there. So Jennifer, at this stage, I will hand back to you. Thank you for keeping us on track, and I appreciate you inviting us to speak to your community today.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today, Richard and Craig. I think it's been a fantastic conversation. Richard, if you can just quickly go to the next slide for just a second. Want to make the offer to anyone who's on the call today. If you're not already a partner and using Auvik's network monitoring and management software, we are offering something special for people who are on the webinar today. Book a demo with us using this URL and you will get a $5 Starbucks or a £5, €5, wherever you happen to be, Starbucks gift card. We do have one question, so if Richard and Craig, you can stay on the line for a minute. We have a question from Jack, and he says, have you any thoughts on a profit share agreement as an option, i.e. take on a partner who retains his or her clients and pays for 50% of costs and takes 50% of profit and keeps their clients too?
Oh, it's a good question. Craig, have you ever been in that situation? I know I've done not dissimilar things to that, yeah.
We partnered with a local IT company, and that was the plan. I mean, look, I'll start from the end. It didn't work. It didn't work for a whole variety of reasons, most of which were things that were outside of what you would call normal business arrangements. But effectively, I think that's a good idea, but in my mind, it's the start of a process where perhaps you would look to grow your business together and merge at some point in the future. I think that can be quite cumbersome and difficult to manage as a 50-50 relationship if both of you are just trying to maintain that split down the middle. At some point, it makes greater sense to come together and pool and work as a business as a single entity, where you perhaps bring all of your clients in together, work on them together, and become partners in a new business that is double the size because there are 2 of you or 4 of you or however that works. I think as a basic idea, it's not bad, but you know what? There are stages before you get to that point that you could try out. So don't go straight in for the really big 50-50 option. You know, work with somebody, maybe get them to do a job for you, you do a job for them, see how it works, build that relationship over time. There are things that you find out about people when you've worked with them for a while that you think are brilliant, but there are also things you find out that are not brilliant. So why not do it in a few smaller steps rather than go straight in with a big sort of contractual 50-50 plan?
Yeah, and your experiences match up pretty much identical with mine. So that, you know, Jack, if you're looking at this, you know, a partnership with a profit share arrangement, and I should say here that you and I, Craig, have come across many IT companies who have gone through strategic alliance with other IT companies and eventually ended up merging or being acquired, an acquisition, something like that. It really does happen because you're building a trusted relationship with someone else. So don't dismiss that sort of acquisition or merger path. But what I would say, Jack, don't try and jump to that early on. I know for MSPs that I have worked with, when they've built strategic alliances, sometimes it's even a barter agreement. So they've said, you know, we'll keep track of the amount of time we work for you. You keep track of the amount of time that we do some work in reverse, and then we'll sort of marry it up. In most cases, though, it tends to be, you know, not so much building bills over periods of time. It's more, look, we're going to deliver this piece of work for you. We're going to invoice it. If you do work for us, invoice us for it. And then if that relationship expands from there, by all means, you can look at, you know, profit shares. But it's not something I would jump into. Take Craig's advice and make it as simple as possible.
Subject for another day, but in reality, there are a few other things you could do within your own business, perhaps working with people like Continuum, InBay, etc. Analyze your business and work out why there are these periods where you don't have time or resource to do something. Try to outsource those first, and only when you reach the point where you've standardized processes, outsourced as much as you can, utilized other external companies for various services as much as possible, do you then get to a point where you go, no, I've really explored every opportunity. Now I definitely need physical body resource as opposed to service resource. So try that first, work with some knock centers or similar, and then come to that where you need physical people-based resources as a second or third step.
Agreed. And Lee actually on chat has said that he's tried it too and it did not end well. You know, I've come across many businesses who have ended up merging or one acquiring the other, and it's worked exceptionally well. But this is something that's done over a period of, you know, months, if not years, to build that relationship up. And it becomes to a natural conclusion where you're better off pulling the businesses together. We did have a question actually from Lee, and thanks for the feedback, Lee. How do you feel about outsourced help desk companies? So we mentioned earlier on, you know, the likes of Continuum, InBay. There are many others around the world that I've included in that resource kit. Personally, when I run an MSP, Lee, the outsourced services we used tended not to be client-facing. So we did not outsource our help desk to the likes of Continuum or Zenith Infotech, as they were called back then. But we did outsource our NOC, all the things that the engineers did behind the scenes that the client didn't see, patching, updates, reboots, things like that. We did outsource. However, Craig, I just want to touch on, you have outsourced help desks, haven't you? And specifically, when I talk about how to outsource help desks, a lot of MSPs feel that their clients wouldn't accept somebody in another part of the world answering their phone call, but you've actually got somebody within your team who's located in another part of the world, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. It's a bit of an unusual one, but the general situation is we had a guy who worked for us in the UK born and bred, called Gavin, great bloke. He married a lady from Tanzania and now lives in Dar es Salaam, which the geography fans amongst us will realise is the capital of Tanzania. So he actually works from there. He provides resource to us, a telephone, remote help desk. He's really good at what he does. And you know what? 50% of our clients don't even know that he's offshore. There are some value benefits from that. In the winter, Tanzania is 3 hours ahead of UK time. And what we do with Gavin is we allocate activity to him, which is some patch management and some sort of back end work, which he can do UK hours between 5:30 in the morning and 8:30 in the morning, so mostly before people come to work, because for him that's that sort of mid to late morning, because he's 3 hours behind in the summer. It's 3 hours ahead, so it's 2 hours in the summer. So there are some value opportunities there. He's a contractor, so we just pay him by the hour, so there's no fixed assets element, there's no PAYE, there's no tax element, it's just a contract hourly basis. So yeah, there are some real values and benefits to working in that way. Just on the Continuum point of view, we outsourced the help desk element to Continuum for the first 3 months of us taking on that big project I spoke of earlier. I'll be candid, there were some positives and there were some negatives. We scaled that back as soon as we realized we were able to take that more in-house. But I cannot say enough good things about their management, monitoring and maintenance of equipment when it comes to, as Richard has said, not disparagingly, the relatively mundane, obvious stuff, patch management, keeping servers up and running and all that sort of stuff. They're brilliant at that. And if you work with someone from the ground up, you can build them into being a really good outsourced help desk partner with Continuum. But if I was to be very, very vague and sort of generic, I would say if you've got a company with 100 staff or more, Continuum are going to be great to support them. If it's less than 100, see where you go. If it's less than 30, I don't think that would be a great fit, because you know the sort of corporate level of support as we understand it is what they do brilliantly. That personal level of service, which is what you probably offer to smaller clients, there may be some gaps that perhaps aren't going to get filled.
I can see the appetite for questions around this topic, around the whole idea of alliances is really there. Unfortunately, we have run to the end of our time today. So I'd say thank you to Jennifer and the team at Auvik for giving us that extra time to answer questions. I really do appreciate it. Craig and I, if we've not already given you the impression, we are really open and honest about our journey within the IT industry, what's worked for us, what hasn't. If you want to reach out to us after this webinar, I'm at Tubblog on Twitter. Craig is at Abussi. Feel free to get in touch with us and continue the conversation. And I hope you get value from that resource kit there that we've made available to you as well. But Jennifer, I'll hand across to you at this stage to close up.
Yeah, thank you. I echo what Richard said. Please feel free, anyone still listening, to reach out. I will answer any question and deal with any query or give a candid response to anything that you want to know. But yeah, Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you, Richard and Craig, for your time and your insights today. And thank you also to everyone who attended the webinar today. We will be sending out that recording to you within 24 hours. Thanks very much.